Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're embarking on a pretty fascinating journey today to answer a fundamental, almost philosophical question. How do we actually measure a country's true success? I mean, think about your own life for a second. If someone asked you whether you just had a successful year, would you just pull out your bank statement and show them your account balance? Probably not, right? You'd talk about your health, things you learned, the experiences you had, and just your overall quality of life. Well, for a very long time, when looking at whole countries, we basically just looked at their bank accounts. But today, we're evaluating something far more profound: the Human Development Index, or HDI. We're going to completely break down how this single metric revolutionized global policy, but going way beyond just money to measure the very real, tangible quality of human life.
So, does more money actually mean a better life? For decades, economists and policymakers operated on this old assumption that a nation's per capita income, which is basically taking the total national income and dividing it by the population, was the absolute ultimate indicator of its people's well-being. And, you can see why this was so appealing for so long. It's a clean, straightforward number. It's incredibly easy to calculate, and it fits super neatly into the columns of an economist's spreadsheet. The thought process was simple. If the average income goes up, naturally, everyone is doing better. But we really have to stop and ask ourselves, is a richer country automatically a healthier, smarter, or happier country in practice? Because here's the thing, a rising line on a spreadsheet might look fantastic, but it often masks a much darker reality. A rising average income hides some really critical systemic issues. For instance, it absolutely doesn't tell us if that brand new national wealth is just being hoarded by a few wealthy individuals, while the number of people struggling below the poverty line is actually increasing. Plus, pure income metrics completely ignore the ruthless exploitation of natural resources and hazardous working environments just to boost output. And think about the immense value of non-economic welfare, like unpaid household labor, cooking, cleaning, taking care of kids or elderly parents. This is literally the bedrock of a functioning society. Yet, traditional income metrics assign it a value of zero. Zero! And they certainly don't care if a country's sudden economic spike came from producing civilian goods that help people or just from manufacturing more weapons. Clearly, money alone is a pretty flawed measuring stick for human thriving.
All right, let's move into Act 1, the HDI Global Revolution.
I want you to picture a spinning globe in your mind, because a massive paradigm shift in economic policy took place to address these exact flaws. The United Nations Development Program, or UNDP, adopted a brilliantly multidimensional approach to fundamentally revolutionize their annual human development reports. They introduced the Human Development Index. This composite measure captures three critical dimensions. First, a long and healthy life. Second, access to knowledge. And third, a decent standard of living. And that last point is crucial. A decent standard of living isn't just about surviving. It's about having reliable shelter, sufficient nutrition, physical safety, and the economic freedom to make choices about your own life. The world was finally waking up to the fact that economic welfare hasn't actually increased if inequality is rising and human beings aren't actually thriving.
And the sheer scale of this metric's global impact, it really cannot be overstated. 600. That is a staggering number. Since it started, the HDI approach has profoundly affected an entire generation of policymakers, inspiring the publication of more than 600 national human development reports all across the globe, including major transformative reports in countries like India. It completely shifted how world leaders plan and evaluate their national goals. Instead of just tracking factory output or crop yields, leaders suddenly had to start tracking hospital beds, maternal health outcomes, and school desks. It forced governments to look at the actual humans living inside their economies. Which brings us to Act 2, measuring true human progress. Imagine balancing a massive scale, right, with pure GDP on one side and vital health and educational metrics on the other. How do economists combine these vastly different things into one usable score? Well, to build the HDI, we construct three individual indices. First, the life expectancy indicator, or LEI, which looks at life expectancy at birth, basically the statistical number of years a newly born baby is expected to live based on current mortality rates. Next, the educational attainment indicator. This captures access to knowledge by combining the adult literacy rate with what's called the gross enrollment ratio. And the gross enrollment ratio simply looks at the total number of students enrolled in primary, secondary, and university levels compared to the total eligible population for those age groups. Finally, we factor in the standard of living indicator, measured by real GDP per capita.
Together, these three slices form a far more complete picture of societal health than we ever had before.
But how do we actually crunch those numbers without comparing apples to oranges? Imagine you're scoring a country out of 100, kind of like a test grade. It's a surprisingly elegant formula used by the UNDP. To find a country's achievement level for any of those indicators, they fix a goalpost, a maximum and a minimum value. Step 1. Take the country's actual value and subtract the minimum value. Step 2. Take the maximum value and subtract the minimum value. Step 3. Divide the result of Step 1 by Step 2. So let's say a nation's life expectancy is 65 years and the global bounds are set at 80 and 20. You do the quick math and you get an index score of 0.75. Once you run this calculation for health, education, and living standards, you just take a simple arithmetic average of the three. And there you have it, a single, powerful number representing your country's Human Development Index.
Let's shift gears to Act 3, the 4 core merits.
Consider this profound shift in perspective right here. It focuses the attention of the policymakers on the ultimate objective of development. This is the absolute beating heart of the HDI. Development isn't about blindly extracting resources or stockpiling national wealth just for the fun of it. The ultimate objective is improving human life. By fundamentally changing the metric of success, the HDI literally changed what politicians and leaders are forced to care about, report on, and improve upon every single day.
So let's explore exactly why this specific index is so universally praised and widely used by international agencies today. There are 4 major merits to cover here. First, it's multidimensional. It brilliantly bridges the gap by combining economic growth indicators with critical social ones. Second, it's a vastly more comprehensive measure than per capita income alone. Third, it dramatically deepens our understanding of true progress. It lets us see which countries are experiencing genuine human development over time, rather than just getting richer on paper. And fourth, it guides policymakers directly to areas needing urgent improvement. Think about it in real-world terms. If a country discovers a massive oil reserve, their GDP will spike overnight. But if they have a high GDP and a low HDI, leaders immediately know that their new wealth isn't trickling down to fund hospitals or schools. It forces targeted, life-saving policy changes. Finally, Act 4. Limitations and future evolutions.
Okay, let's bring out our metaphorical magnifying glass for a minute. Because as revolutionary as the HDI has been in economic thought, no single metric is absolutely perfect. The HDI relies on only 3 variables. Let that sink in for a moment. Human life, societies, and entire national structures are unbelievably complex. By simplifying human development into just 3 dimensions, health, education, and standard of living, the HDI inevitably creates massive blind spots. While it's a fantastic baseline, it really cannot possibly be treated as a fully comprehensive index of everything a society goes through. Despite its vast improvements over simple per capita income, the basic HDI still ignores some really crucial factors. It ignores the devastating toll of environmental degradation. It entirely hides income inequality within a country because, again, it still relies on national averages. Critical, life-altering issues like extreme poverty and basic human security are omitted from the main calculation entirely. And on top of that, the original HDI lacked disaggregated data. That means it couldn't drill down to show glaring inequalities. A country might boast a high average life expectancy of 75 years, but that average could be hiding a massive health crisis where a specific minority group or marginalized region is dying at 55. Without separating the data by gender, region, or ethnicity, the most vulnerable populations essentially remained invisible. But, the story doesn't end there. To address these glaring gaps, organizations like the UNDP have had to continuously evolve their approach. They realize that you can't just stop at measuring average achievements, you actually have to aggressively measure deprivation too. This vital realization led to the introduction of newer, more nuanced measures, like the Human Poverty Index. Instead of asking, what is the average level of success, these evolving metrics ask, who is suffering the most deprivation in health, knowledge, and living standards? By working to fill the critical gaps left behind, this ensures that those falling through the cracks of a rising national average are finally seen. So this brings us to a deeply provocative question for you to ponder. As our world rapidly changes, how will we measure the missing pieces of human progress tomorrow? The transition to the HDI was a massive leap forward from just counting dollars, shifting the global focus to the quality of human life. But the journey to truly capturing human well-being is definitely ongoing. What specific indicators do you think are still missing from the global equation today? Keep questioning the systems around you, keep learning, and thank you so much for joining me for today's Explainer.